Bring in show music, please.
Hi, I'm CNBC producer Katie Kramer. Today on Squawk Pod. Deals before the next tariff deadline of August 1st. Day 2 of trade talks in Sweden. Our Eamon Javers has the latest on the negotiations with China.
No indication that any progress of any kind has been made so far. The bar was already pretty low for this.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick explains the art of the deal with the European Union.
It was important for them to have pharmaceuticals be part of the deal at 15%. Because President Trump is going to come out in the next 2 weeks with his pharmaceutical policy, and it is going to be higher.
A New York City gunman kills 4 in a Park Avenue building. Security expert Dave Komendat on what business leaders are asking today.
Have they done all they can do to be prepared?
And what changes might come.
I think you could try to make it harder for people with mental illnesses to get guns as easily as they do.
You hear that a lot from Second Amendment. They always talk about mental illness, and then the left gets mad that they're talking about mental illness instead of just the gun itself.
It's Tuesday, July 29th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
We had a number of shots fired, and we're still unraveling what took place. Our hearts are heavy. 5 innocent people shot tonight. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Police Commissioner of the City of New York, Commissioner Tisch.
Thank you, sir. At 6:28 p.m., the 911 call center started receiving multiple 911 calls for an active shooter inside of 345 Park Avenue at 52nd Street in Manhattan.
Let's talk about what took place last night. Officials saying a gunman opened fire inside a Midtown Manhattan office building and killed a New York police officer and 3 other people. Law enforcement sources telling NBC News the suspected shooter acted alone and died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The building where that shooting took place houses offices for so many businesses, so many that we know so well here on this broadcast, the NFL, as well as Blackstone, KPMG, and real estate firm Rudin. 4 senior law enforcement officials say the suspect has been identified as 27-year-old Shane Devon Tamura of Las Vegas. The gunman's motive not disclosed, but officials familiar with the investigation telling NBC News the suspect left a note at the scene voicing anger that his mental illness may be linked to his having played football. 2 officials say in the note the suspect wonders about CTE being a possible cause of his mental illness. A 36-year-old NYPD officer who was expecting his 3rd child was killed. 3 civilians also died. Their names have not been released. But this is one of those stories that hits so close to home. I've been to that building so many times. I was texting literally with a bunch of people who were holed up last night in the building as this was all taking place. It was a very scary and very sad day, and says, well, we could take this story into a whole about 100 different directions. So I don't know where you want to go with it, but it's
Football and NFL, I guess. That no motive announced yet, but that seems like more than maybe a coincidence. He had a history of mental illness as well, and was a football star at one point in either high school or college.
It does raise concerns about the safety of these buildings in New York City, particularly after the United Healthcare executive who was gunned down earlier in the year. Some issues around that, surrounding those things too. But again, it hits home because it's in the heart of the financial district here, and
I mean, it's Park Avenue. It's come straight to the middle of it, and I think that the murder last year that you referred to, I think, is a big issue. Right. I think that the football piece of it is a big issue. I think the fact that he had mental illness and had a licensed firearm.
License to carry in Las Vegas.
License to carry in Las Vegas, obviously not legal here, but, we talk about mental illness. We also talk about, can you do anything about, making sales of guns, reasonable? You don't have to prevent people from buying guns, but when you have people who have mental illnesses, The idea that we allow people to get access to that.
Well, we're trying to stop that, obviously. But
I don't think we're not trying to stop it.
If you're going to go to that
well
angle,
enough.
if you go to that angle, then go to the safety concerns about
New
York City and who we're going to elect as mayor.
By the way,
he'd have social workers rushing the scene to try to talk the guy out of.
We're not going to disagree about that.
All right, that's the other.
We're not going to disagree about that at all.
He's on record. Defund the police, please. So and with that looming in the future of New York City, it's not safe. It doesn't feel safe. Maybe it is. Writ large, but there's a lot of people, obviously. And
by the way, to your point though, or a point that you've made historically, not in this moment, most security in New York City that operates and runs buildings, meaning in the lobbies of buildings, are actually not all armed. They're not.
No, but this was a police officer, an off-duty police officer.
No, I'm saying, but there's a question about
gun-free zones.
But there's a question about safety in the city, and you've often argued, I think, that you actually need more people to be armed.
Yes.
So that's all I'm saying is that's what I'm saying. You can take this conversation in 100 different ways.
Gun-free zones are kind of absurd because who is it that pays attention to the law that it's a gun-free zone?
Law-abiding citizens.
And the people that are going to, if you're going to commit murder, you're not going to worry about carrying a gun in a gun-free zone or violating the gun-free zone rule. It's kind of absurd.
Well, no, and so there's a very interesting question about security of buildings. Do you want to harden those buildings in different ways? How do you do that? It requires a lot of training if you actually are going to put guns in the hands of security officers that are not police officers or former police officers. It's intractable. It's an intractable problem that I wish wasn't intractable.
Yeah, but it is. Yeah.
I don't know if it is. I think it shouldn't be. I think there's probably ways to do things.
Hardening things up is probably what
I think you could probably do a combination of things. I think you could harden certain things up, but at the same time, I think you could try to make it harder for people with mental illnesses to get guns as easily as they do.
Right.
And I think if you can't think about all of the above rather than only one of the above, it gets very difficult, and that's why it's intractable.
You hear that a lot from Second Amendment. They always talk about mental illness, and then the left gets mad that they're talking about mental illness instead of just the gun itself. That happens all the time. It's like, now you're going to talk about prayers and thoughts and mental illness instead of actually doing something. Like I think Mamdani wants all guns gone.
Well, no, you got to do something. By the way, if you want folks who have mental illnesses that are on the street off the streets, you should also want them not to have guns.
I agree.
Okay.
I think that people don't.
So if you're there, then
that's what I'm saying. We're not going to get right and left, but you hear mental illness all the time. We need to do more about mental illness from the Second Amendment types that say, it's not the guns, it's the mental illness. So deal with that first. And then it's a circular argument. You get back to what are they doing with guns in the first place.
That's why you got to do it all.
Well, it would be in a perfect world. You'd want no one that had any mental illness. If you're going to shoot someone, by definition, you're probably mentally ill. So back at the trade negotiating table for a second day in Sweden. Eamon Javers is in Stockholm, joins us now with more. Good morning, Eamon.
Yeah, good morning to you, Joe. We know that talks are underway here for a second day after just under 5.5 hours behind closed doors yesterday. No indication of any progress so far, and really no indication of what was even discussed yesterday behind those closed doors. We do have a new post on social media from the president. Take a look at that. The president saying the fake news is reporting that I am seeking a summit with President Xi of China. This is not correct. I'm not seeking anything. I may go to China, but it would only be at the invitation of President Xi, which has been extended. Otherwise, no interest. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The question here, Joe and gang, is why is the president sort of backing off that meeting with Xi Jinping? He has been talking fairly favorably about a meeting with Xi Jinping, whether a summit or not, however you bill it. Now, this seems to be a change in tone. Does that reflect what's happening behind closed doors here in Stockholm? that's to be determined. We're going to wait and see what officials say when they emerge from their session today. We are hoping to get a press conference later today from officials here, at least on the U.S. side, to brief us on what's been discussed. The expectation is that they'll go through the day today, possibly into tomorrow. And we did get a picture behind the scenes provided to us by the Department of Treasury of both delegations at their tables, notebooks and pens and bottles of water ready. So clearly a working session behind closed doors here, but no indication that any progress of any kind has been made so far. The bar was already pretty low for this. The expectation was that they might be able to extend that August 12th deadline for the previous deal to expire and kick that into the fall. We'll see if they can get there, though, Joe. No sense, as I say, that any progress has been made so far.
It was a strange twist that you pointed out, because a lot of, the president and all his men, I guess you have to say, and all his people at this point, but yeah, they've repeatedly said, that's between, it's probably not going to happen at lower levels. For this to get done, it's going to happen between President Trump and President Xi. So it makes you wonder when all of a sudden the president is downplaying that's going to happen anytime soon. It could be that things aren't going well in terms of that setting up that meeting, or you never know whether he's trying to in some way force the hand of by saying that. You don't know if he's bargaining, again in some way to try and get China to the table. I don't know. It's impossible to discern at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely a striking change in tone from the president on the possibility of that meeting. He's talked about it in a very positive way before. He said that Xi Jinping has invited him to Beijing.
Yeah, we really like each other, respect each other, all that.
It's been very positive rhetoric, and this is dialing back from that. So as you say, either this is reflective of something going wrong behind closed doors in the sessions here in Stockholm, or it's trying to position that meeting so that he doesn't seem as eager to have the meeting as he had been, to make it seem as if Xi Jinping is more eager than he is. You can look for a number of different explanations for that, but it is something to note.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Eamon. Tough day for levity, obviously, but you didn't have any more meatballs. I mean, they'd be, at this point, they'd probably be sticking in your stomach.
No.
You just
They're pretty heavy. Yeah.
That's what I mean.
It's one night was enough. One night was enough. So last night, we don't get off work here until like 11 p.m. local time. So we found the one restaurant that was still serving. The kitchen was still open last night. I had the shrimp salad last night. Seafood is very big here, too. Lots of water, as you can see behind me. Lots of harbors, lots of water, canals, rivers.
Hence the seafood.
It's a very nautical culture here, so that's why I had the seafood.
Nautical. All right. Good. I'm good. Yeah. You can't have them every day.
I'll bring you back some samples.
Dude, I don't know. Put them in some ice, dry ice. Thanks, Eamon.
We'll see if they travel. We'll see how well they travel.
Shares of Sarepta Therapeutics up by about 36% in the pre-market. The company says that it will resume shipping Elevidys, that's a muscular disorder gene therapy, to patients who can walk. Last week, the FDA recommended a pause in shipments because of serious safety concerns after 3 deaths of patients who were on Serepta gene therapies. This past weekend, there were reports of a death of another child on Elevidys, but the death, the FDA now says, was unrelated to the gene therapy. In a statement, Serepta CEO says, "We look forward to working collaboratively with the FDA to complete the safety label update for Elevidys and to discussing the approach to risk mitigation for non-ambulatory patients who remain on pause pending the outcome of those discussions." Despite this morning's jump, in Serepta shares, that stock is still down by about 84% this year. But again, guys, this was a really big and very public display of what was happening. There were concerns about deaths. There's a new guy at the FDA, Vinay Prasad, who's the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. He had originally said he wanted them to stop shipping it altogether. The deaths had taken place in people who were non-ambulatory. This is a progressive disease. First, it makes you disabled so you can't walk, and then it eventually kills you. They have not had problems with this gene therapy on people who were still ambulatory. The FDA wanted them to stop shipments to the still ambulatory patients who were on it. There was a huge pushback from the patients' families because this is the only therapy that's out there, the only drug they can get access to. The FDA later relented and said, okay, you could continue to make those shipments. But we've watched the stock play out with some huge drops.
That's yesterday's.
This was yesterday's Wall Street Journal. It was their lead op-ed story on this, talking about what they called the Serepta mugging in drug innovation, basically saying that Vinay Prasad has shut down a lot of the drug innovation that the first Trump administration was very well known for the pushes on innovation that they were coming in with. And so there was pushback that came not only from the Wall Street Journal op-ed pages, but it was on the right and the left. You've seen a lot just over the last weekend that kind of went after this because of what they've seen with it.
Tease will be next.
Coming up on Squawk Pod, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick recapping the White House's trade deal with the European Union. It all came down to autos and pharma.
President Trump has been very, very clear. If you're going to sell here, you're going to produce here. And so the Europeans got in front of that freight train and said, we'll pay you 15% for that, but we don't want you to rip all of our companies out of Europe and move them to America.
This is Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Sorkin along with Joe Kernan and Becky Quick.
Trade talks continue today in Stockholm as the president's tariff deadline approaches for some on August 1st, China August 12th. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick joins us right now. It's always good to see you, Mr. Secretary. Will you bear with me for just a second before we talk China? Let's talk about the EU deal. And I know you think it's just great and a big victory for the president. That's your take. I'm going to let you explain why. And I'm not going to defer to the Democrats or legacy media on whether it's a good deal or not. I'm going to go right to who it really seemed to upset, and that's France and Germany. And even the European Commission president, you heard what she said. I thought it was very telling. She goes, look, I know this is awful for us. It's the best I could get. I'm trying to salvage them. So I think that indicates, and I don't want to be too jingoistic or America first, but to me that indicated that the president was able to get a pretty good deal.
Exactly right. The president knew how far he could go, and he went exactly that far. The thing about our president is he's got that intuitive nature when he's sitting across the table and making a deal. He knows how far he can push it. I mean, imagine they committed to $750 billion of energy purchases, natural gas and oil and nuclear, during his term. They committed $600 billion of companies investing in America, and then 15% tariffs. They will pay 15% pretty much across the board. And we, of course, have an open market to the $20 trillion European market. It's 5 times bigger than any other, Japan and India, 5 times bigger with 450 million people. It was a masterclass by President Trump.
I think that and everybody's saying it, that the decision to accept the 15% level was in sharp contrast to where they were recently, weeks ago, with a much more adversarial tone. And they came to the realization that President Trump thinks that these 15% tariffs should be permanent. And my question is, can you make a strong rationale for why that is the case? Wouldn't it, if it was 0-0 on both sides, and even got some other things extracted from the EU? Do we want this 15% to onshore? Is that what it's all about, bringing stuff back here? Or is it about all the revenue that gets collected from whomever you want to say is paying it, whether it's you say it's foreign countries or companies here or consumers or whatever? Why is that the status quo, that it's going to be permanent?
Okay, so Europe has a $235 billion a year trade surplus with us, which means at the end of every year, they end up with $235 billion worth of dollars. They sell us more stuff than we sell them. And you know what they do with those dollars? They just buy America. We're basically having America sold out from under us by continuing to have these 1.2 trillion globally trade deficit, which every economist says should not be able to happen. But it's been staying with us for more than decades. So it's got to end. The president is changing it. So his view is you can onshore to get rid of it, or you can pay a tariff to get rid of it. But let's figure out how to get rid of it. And the key to why the Europeans did the deal is autos and pharmaceuticals. I mean, remember, we are the payer of the world, right? All pharmaceuticals, they all make their money by selling to America. And President Trump has been very, very clear. If you're going to sell here, you're going to produce here. And so the Europeans got in front of that freight train and said, we'll pay you 15% for that, but we don't want you to rip all of our companies out of Europe and move them to America. So while the French have got a lot to say, they were able to protect Sanofi from staying in France, because if they didn't do this deal, Sanofi would become an American company.
Secretary Lutnick, I think there are still some questions and uncertainties that remain around it. I know both sides have agreed that this is a framework, not legally binding at this point. But if you listen to some of the EU leaders, they'll say that there are some uncertainties still out there. And I just wonder where you think they came down, just in terms of steel and aluminum tariffs still being there at 50%. What happens with pharmaceuticals eventually? Will they be maintained at 15%, or are there additional tariffs that come in there? Some of the certain natural resources as well. And they have said that they can't promise that these pretty hefty expectations for purchases and investment, those massive targets, whether they'll be able to hit them or not, because they're relying in large part on private funding. There's still a lot to work out. They've said that sometimes these agreements usually will take years. Do you think that will be the case here?
Well, historically, these kind of agreements would take a decade. and they, of course, wouldn't come to fruition, right? Barack Obama spoke to them for his whole term and never got anything accomplished. President Trump works on a different time frame and on a different clock. He wants to get things done now, and he uses the power of the American economy to get things done now. So pharmaceuticals was key. It was important for them to have pharmaceuticals be part of the deal at 15%, because President Trump is going to come out in the next 2 weeks with his pharmaceutical policy, and it is going to be higher. Basically, if you are not building your plant in America where we pay for pharmaceuticals, you are going to pay a massive tariff, because why should we pay for your drugs and you make them overseas and you make your money overseas? At least if we're going to pay for your drugs, you're going to build them in America. So they got ahead of that. They got ahead of pharmaceuticals. They wanted to get ahead of cars, because 25% on autos means, as you've heard Donald Trump say it, you're going to build your cars in America. No one can afford to export and pay a 25% tariff. So the Europeans found the highest level that they could survive with, because President Trump would not have cut it otherwise. And they could then keep their autos there. You know, they'll do many build plants here, but they don't have to move them all here. And that was the model. They can move a lot, but they don't have to move it all. So I think when we talk about it in a year, you'll see the Europeans are satisfied with it, because when they see the full Donald Trump policy, which they understood, they knew this was the important deal for them. And of course, it was sensational for Donald Trump, because it proves everything he said about tariffs is absolutely true. And you can see it right here, right now.
Mr. Secretary, do you think the negotiations are over? And the reason I say over, meaning there's big questions about other issues I think that the president would like from Europe, for example, around big tech and the regulations on them and digital taxes and all sorts of other things. And so I raise the question, is it possible that there's additional conversations about some of those issues, and that those issues get brought back into a different discussion around tariffs, so that the ceiling becomes 15%, but actually it could go lower perhaps if, in fact, there were other agreements that were reached? Is that even possible? Is that a chess piece?
Well, I wouldn't say lower. I mean, natural resources, the president did include, when he does a deal, he does include, if you grow something and we don't grow it, that can come in for zero. So if we do a deal with a country that grows mangoes or pineapples, then they can come in without a tariff, because coffee and cocoa would be other examples of natural resource. So an example for Europe that they brought up is cork. You know, like the cork on that we all see in our houses. Cork can come into the United States without a tariff. And do I expect to continue to be talking to the European Commission's trade people? Yeah, they called me this morning to talk about what are other things to talk about. Digital services taxes and the attack on our tech companies, that is going to be on the table. It wasn't on the table today. There are other things that they would like steel and aluminum, that were not included in this deal, that will be on the table. There's plenty of horse trading still to do, but the fundamentals of their $20 trillion economy are set. We sell into them without a tariff. They sell into us for 15%, but they protect themselves on autos. They protect themselves on pharma. They protect themselves on semiconductors. And those three protections were fundamental for the European Commission. And anybody who picks on them is going to learn over the next 2 weeks why the people who did that deal were really smart to get this deal done with Donald Trump.
You can wrap China into this, but other countries where things are, Canada. What about Canada? I don't know what they're feeling now at this point. India, is that imminent? What do you expect to happen? And what's really happening with China in your view right now? Are things going okay with some of the president's comments about fake news, says I want a meeting with Xi? It's not true. We thought that there was eventually going to be some type of meeting between President Xi and President Trump, and that was going to be where we really got down to brass tacks.
Well, I think with respect to other countries, what's happened is many countries had made us okay offers to open their markets, 50%, 30%. And then the president said, no, I want them open. And then they get up to 75%. And the president said, I want it open. So now the price of a deal with the United States of America is black and white. Completely open markets. He wants to make sure that Americans can sell their goods overseas. He's tired of all those years where it was unfair and asymmetric against us. He wants to right the wrong of the last 80 years of trade policy, and he wants to do it now, and that's what he's doing. So are there deals on the table for him to consider? Yes, but he knows that he can just set the rate and set the price and move on, and he said that over and over again. We put in front of him the deal, he sees the deal, and he decides, do I want to do a deal with India or I don't? And that is up to him. We've done our job. They've made offers, but these countries came to the table slowly from what President Trump was hoping for. But of course, from their perspective, no one's moved as fast as the world has moved with respect to Donald Trump. He has moved the world in a way that no one can imagine. He's done this in 6 months. This is amazing, and I am, as you can tell, I'm having the best time working for Donald Trump.
We're out of time, but so you think it's more likely that musical chairs, people are looking around thinking, no one wants to be last, do they? You think we're going to hear more?
No.
Well, China's going to be tough.
All day.
China's going to, we only got 30 seconds, but China's going to be tougher.
Always.
Yeah.
China is their own thing. We have our own team working with China. They're their own thing. I'll leave the people who are working with China right now to give you a briefing on what they've accomplished and where they are. I'll leave it to them. But for the rest of the world, we're going to have things done by Friday. And Friday is not that far away. So you should expect, we said August 1st is the date that we're setting all these rates. And they are off to the races after that.
Friday's close, and then Monday's close, unfortunately, too. Secretary, we got to go. Thank you very much.
Next on Squawk Pod, the shocking evening shooting at a Midtown Manhattan office building has the corporate world on edge. We'll talk to expert Dave Komendat, former Boeing security officer, on the safety of the spaces where we work.
It's difficult unless you want to create really perception that a building's unsafe and having officers walking around with long guns. That's not really practical.
You're listening to Squawk Pod from CNBC. Here's Andrew Ross Sorkin.
A gunman opened fire inside a Manhattan office building, killed a New York City police officer and 3 other people. The gunman then took his own life. The building where that shooting took place houses offices for the NFL, Blackstone, KPMG, and real estate firm Rudin. Joining us right now with a look at corporate security is Dave Komendat. He's the former Boeing Vice President, Chief Security Officer. He's now a partner, Chief Security Officer for Corporate Security Advisors. Good morning to you. Dave, you know, this is a tragedy that I think a lot of us watched on television unfold last night. I was getting texts actually from people inside the building as it was happening. When you think about corporate security in New York City, and you think about what goes on in lobbies, what goes on the street, are there lessons that we should be taking away from this morning?
Well, first of all, good morning, and thank you for having me. And really, such a tragic incident and loss of life. I think that the thing that corporate security leaders are looking at today is what they've looked at previously when you see incidents like this. Have they done all they can do to be prepared? Have they put together an intelligence-led security program that gives them the opportunity, hopefully, for early threat detection, rapid information sharing, and a coordinated response? And it's early in this investigation, but it's pretty clear that a lot of good things did happen yesterday.
If you were advising companies this morning that are saying to themselves, what should we be doing about our own security, what would you be telling them?
Well, I think they need to understand from a proactive intelligence, do they have a good perspective of their internal and external threats? You know, there are people that make threats that don't pose a threat. There are people that make threats that do pose a threat. And there are also people that never make a threat and are a threat. And so do they have the capability and the tools and the communications internally to work with themselves and also their partners in the building security and local law enforcement to put those pieces together and be able to identify people who may be showing undue interest in their company, the building itself, or someone within that building. And so I think that's what they're looking at today is, have we done everything we can do to be prepared for an event like this and hopefully prevent it?
In terms, though, of hardening buildings, especially in New York City, most of which have security guards, but not of all of whom are carrying weapons with them. Should they be?
Well, I think that's a building by building decision. And as we saw yesterday, when someone comes in with that type of capability, it's difficult unless you want to create really a perception that a building's unsafe and having officers walking around with long guns. That's not really practical. Building security in New York and in most major cities is very good. There's a process to get into those buildings. And this was one of those, again, low frequency, high impact events where the person walked in and basically ambushed everyone in that lobby with little to no warning. I'm not sure there would be anything that anyone could have done yesterday in that lobby, in that immediate moment, to change the outcome.
No, but Dave, the reason I ask is there are certain buildings in New York City where there is either a police presence or sometimes security that literally walks the outdoor corridors of the building, some of whom are carrying weapons. I mean, sort of clear efforts to sort of suggest to anybody who would consider threatening such a place, you know, you're not coming in here kind of thing.
Yeah, Dave, there's a far cry between carrying a long gun and having a weapon that you could have that, you know, that's not even obvious. I mean, a gun-free zone is totally unprotected and a total soft target. You would never see a government building in Washington, D.C. or anywhere else where you wouldn't have someone that could use deadly force if he or she was presented with it himself.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And in this case, there was an armed personnel in that lobby, the off-duty police officer, Officer Islam, who unfortunately lost his life. But he was outgunned. That individual walked in with far more capacity and capability than the officer had, and the officer likely had no opportunity to even respond.
Dave, finally, there's sort of a larger question, obviously, about mental health. Gun violence. This was somebody who had a mental health problem, clearly, and also clearly had access to a gun, at least in the state of Nevada, where he was given a license
for carry.
What do you think has to happen here? And by the way, even a larger question, what should the role of business even be in that conversation?
Well, that's a large question. And obviously, the individual was licensed to carry the weapon. Apparently, he was able to purchase his weapon legally. Don't know about this particular weapon as the investigation's in the early days. But, clearly we've seen time and time again in some of these instances where the shooters have a mental health issue, and it's been documented. And the question always comes back to, well, should they be permitted to maintain their weapon? And in many cases, in many states, if there is a concern about someone, that weapon can be for their own protection, the protection of others. Law enforcement can confiscate that weapon for a period of time to make sure that that individual is not in a position where they will do harm to themselves or other people. We'll have to understand over the coming days and as this investigation unfolds into what authorities knew, what, if any, actions had been taken in Nevada with this particular individual. But at the end of the day, it's a tragedy and just another unfortunate example.
Dave, I want to thank you for joining us. We appreciate your perspective on this morning. We also have some very sad news to report, which is Blackstone, one of the tenants in that building, is just out with a statement. It says the company is heartbroken to share that colleague Wesley LePatner was among those who lost their lives in that tragic incident yesterday. She was the CEO of the Blackstone Real Estate Income Trust. Blackstone said its prayers are with her husband, children, and family, and ours are too. And it's, I think it just hits so close to home because this happened really in the center of New York City in a building that I think we've all been to and that a lot of people know. And it's right here on our doorstep.
Our thoughts and prayers go out to her family and to her colleagues, and we're so sorry for what they're dealing with today.